Growing up, I only knew about these kinds of watercolors. Remember them? When I began my watercolor journey in 2016, I bought this pan set from Winsor & Newton. And after a year or so, I discovered watercolor tubes. Since then, I've gotten my hands on a lot more watercolor types, including liquid, crayon, and pencil. I've yet to try watercolor markers though. And I'm not sure if there are other types out there, so if there are, let me know. But I thought it would be fun in this video to kind of look at the types that I own and to show you how I use or have used them and just my general thoughts. Spoiler alert, I do use the pans the most and tubes probably the second most often, but I'm curious to see if you use these types and if you like them. Hi there, I'm Audrey, your watercolor bestie, and welcome to my studio. So since I already talked about the pros and cons of watercolor tubes and pans in this video, I'm going to focus on watercolor pencils, crayon, and liquid watercolors. So here we go. I've never done a video on just watercolor pencils, and I don't use these as often as I would like, at least not to paint. I have used them to outline my sketches, but even then I don't use it for that sole purpose either. I've seen other people use them to fill in backgrounds, add textures, etc. When I did use them, I did like how it releases more pigment when you draw on wet paper. That's pretty cool. This year, however, I would like to try and incorporate more texture into my artwork, so I think using color pencils might be really fun. So stay tuned. I only have one type of watercolor crayons, and that's the Caran d'Ache water-soluble wax pastels. And I bought them a while ago because I just wanted to explore other types of watercolor. But that exploration didn't last long and lasted only enough to record one YouTube video. So if you want to watch that, I'll link it in the description. It was a long time ago, so no judging. What I did like about these pastels or crayons was how easy they were to use. You can sketch with them, fill in with a wet brush later. The only downside was that I found that it was kind of difficult to layer because you'd have to add excess water in order to activate the pastel. Then I ended up disturbing the underlayers. I do like how bright and vibrant and pigmented these are, and they're fairly transparent when you try to layer them, unless you draw really hard and fill in all the gaps. I think one way you can use them to more of an advantage is by painting on the go. So all you need is a water brush, a handful of these colors, a small sketchbook, and then out you go. So maybe I'll try that. Liquid watercolors became a staple in my kit when I started teaching in-person workshops. I needed something portable, easy to use, and easy to clean up. What I used to do at the beginning of my business, because I didn't know any better, was that I used tube paints and plastic palettes. So I would squeeze a little bit into the wells and then let my students use them. But unless they paid to keep the palette, it was really hard to reuse them because the colors were cross-contaminated or there wasn't enough of it. It just wasn't conducive for reusing. So I found that liquid watercolors was the best solution. Now there are a few brands that I own and have used, but I like to use the Blick because it's just the most cost efficient. So I normally get the 4-ounce bottles and they're about $5 and I get 5 colors: the red, yellow, green, blue, and brown. And I give a really small squeeze of paint in 5 of the wells, and they last a really long time. They're non-toxic, so you can wash them down the drain with no worry. And I've used them for the past 4 years or so. So if you want to know more about the supplies that I use when I teach in-person workshops, leave a comment down below and let me know. Now there are other ways to use liquid watercolors, of course. I've used it to create calligraphy pieces or add greater vibrancy to my paintings, especially when I'm doing the wet on wet technique. It's super cool if you use it that way. But in general, I don't use them as often, and I found it difficult to reactivate properly after it's dried because I found that there was a really thin layer of film that I just couldn't get rid of, and it's kind of annoying. Even if you don't teach workshops like I do, I think it's still great to use, especially if you have kids. Because they're so easy to use and easy to clean up, it's great for a quick art activity and then put it away. You don't have to wait for the palette to dry, just wash it right off and pat dry with a paper towel. You only need small amounts because a small amount will go a long way. They're super vibrant. So if you like bright, transparent colors, liquid watercolors is what you want. Now, the downside to that is that liquid watercolors are usually dye-based rather than pigment-based. So that means two things. One, it can stain your clothes, so be really careful. And two, it's going to fade over time. So if you're doing art just for yourself, or you plan on scanning them immediately and then working on them digitally, then I think that's totally okay. But I'd steer clear if you're using them for commissioned artworks that's going to be framed and put on the wall and cherished forever. So that's it for other types of watercolor. We looked at watercolor pencils, crayons, and liquid. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these types. And if you've used any of them, please let me know in the comments. I'd like to know which ones you've used, why you've used them, and how you use them. Please subscribe to this channel and like this video if it was helpful. And if you want to learn more watercolor basics, you can join my free course, Watercolor Basics for the Absolute Beginner, available in the Watercolor Garden. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Happy painting. Bye.